Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to the monastery, the open bar of the internet, the world's greatest shit show, and the place where we, the good brothers and sisters of this most holy of temples, seek enlightenment through the drunkest, craziest, and most batshit ways possible. I am your one and only gaming monk, better known as Mildra, and with me I have a returning good brother to the temple, previously here for Galactic Anarchy, now with the Orobos Championship Tournament. The one and only Nicholas Robinson. How you doing today, man?
Hi, pretty good. How are you?
I'm doing good. Just getting used to the end of winter. Damn it.
Pollen season.
I don't have to worry about pollen per se, but it's just I much prefer colder weather over warmer, because when it's cold you can always put on another layer.
Fair enough.
Kind of hard to do that when it gets sufficiently warm out, unless you want to say you're cosplaying Archimedes.
Yeah, I kind of do it. Go for a Tatooine silt suit. Just gonna mix our properties together.
So, I will note with this current project, Orobos. This is it's certainly a departure from the last few projects that I've had you on for, which were 5e campaign settings, and this is a standalone. You refer to it as a skirmish RPG, which gives me the vibe of like a skirmish-style war game and an RPG hybrid. Would that be accurate?
Yeah, it definitely. So the rule system are inspired heavily by like skirmish style games where players gather their small group of heroes or their forces. I want it to be something that's accessible with very little barrier to entry, so you can play with whatever figures you've got on hand. You don't need a grid, but you can if you really like one. And it uses those style of rules because they go really, really fast, and you can get a lot of little guys on the table smashing stuff really quickly.
Yeah, I can get that. And I believe you had also hinted at on the Kickstarter page that one of the major inspirations was the OC tournaments that you'd see in forums back in the day.
Oh yeah, those are big. When back when I was in high school and then early college, met a lot of good friends through those, and tried out. Didn't get into some, but it was good to kind of be a part of that community and just it was a great experience, and it's good to see that it's still around. There are still some. It's not quite as big as it used to be, but it's still there.
Yeah. And that brings an interesting thing, because within those kind of character tournaments, you'd see characters from all over the place, from different genres, subgenres, styles of fantasy, sometimes not even fantasy. And I know that you're using a point buy affair, but how do you maintain that degree of variety while also keeping it somewhat accessible?
You mean like how do we get the point buy accessible, or like the game as a whole?
I would say the bigger thing is making sure that analysis paralysis is minimized, since that is something that can happen, especially with point buy affairs.
Sure. So in most of our categories, like when it comes to picking your ancestry or like a race option in other games, you're limited to two overarching options. So like you could be humanoid and draconic, or you could be Fae and outsider, and then each one of those has a certain skills that are available to it. We're working on ways to possibly expand that, because obviously this, like the preview document we got up there, is just something to get people trying out the game, and we can always add more into that, and we do plan to add more into that. As part of that is reworking exactly what options you have available for each group, or for each of the, we call them archetypes for our classes. Having those two options to choose from, basically you pick two of them to mix together with the kind of broad idea that you want to start with, and you build out from there. It's like, if you ever play, so for a sec, you ever play Titan Quest, where you've got the like two masteries, and you mix them together. It's a similar idea where you start with like, oh man, I really want to do this and this, and then I kind of figure out where I'm going later once I smash them together.
Yeah. And it's funny you mentioned Titan Quest, since I know that a sequel to that is in the works that got announced shortly after everything that happened with Diablo 4, which was another case of I am once again a prophet.
I'm looking forward.
Yeah, I had joked that Diablo 4 became a great advertisement for other ARPGs, and then that gets announced.
Yeah, I think they just started early access not that long ago. I think.
Yeah, I haven't checked on that, but it wouldn't surprise me if that was the case. And I could certainly see it. And in all fairness, I think when it comes to the idea of skirmish style games, especially when it comes to minis, I think one of the main ones that people will think of is stuff like the smaller scale modes with BattleTech, or things like Mordheim / Necromunda. Would you say that Orobos is on that kind of scale?
As far as like the number of minis you have on there,
yeah,
probably, because I think Mordheim's pretty small. Our generally speaking.
Mhm.
I just thinking like some other stuff people might be familiar with as well. Like I know there was a campaign in Frostgrave, or like 5 parsecs from home, which is not exactly skirmish, but that kind of idea of like having a small group of heroes against the enemies. Frostgrave is probably closer to that, but
And I brought
yeah, that
up
kind of idea where it's
I brought up BattleTech because
yeah.
in the Alpha Strike variant of that, um, you're assumed to be only playing a lance, which is usually 4 mechs or 5 if you're dealing with a star, which is only done by clanners, and nobody likes clanners.
That's one I'd like to try. There's a lot more minis games and miniatures games and skirmish games out there than I would ever have time or money to play. But that's one on my list of like one I'd like to check out at some point, because there's quite a lot of good ones.
Mm-hmm.
I also like to study, even if I know I won't be able to play it. I like watching the reviews for them and seeing some. There's a couple good YouTube channels that do reviews or playthroughs of some of these, so you can get like a handle of the rules system and find out like how the tone meshes with the style of play, and you can kind of go like, well, I like that idea, but I think this would be more fitting for what I'm doing. Kind of.
Yeah. And in the case of something like BattleTech, I have a fondness for seeing what sort of crazy setups people end up making, or just crazy interpretations of mechs. But within that, since this is more of a hybrid affair, when it comes to point buy, would it be fair of me to say that you're building characters the way you'd build them in an RPG versus building an army in a minis game?
Yeah, it's much closer to that, because you've got your particular character. You probably as a player would have your one character, and each other player would have theirs. But there is an option to be able to play solo. I've got standard, solo, and competitive, because I want you to be able to go with the traditional skirmish style rules, but you have a GM basically controlling the enemies. There's solo, which is same thing, but you are the GM and just kind of make the best judgments you can for the enemies. And then competitive, where the GM is instead more of a referee, and you each control a separate team, and then you'd be more in control of your characters and the various. Then you would have some monsters on your side. That's something that last part does need some more testing. I'd like some folks to test that if we can. I've got the traditional part down pat. We'd like to work on competitive. It's just that one requires a lot more scheduling and people to get together.
I will admit, when I looked at the action economy and seeing the automatic reaction thing, in a roundabout way, I ended up being reminded of Infinity, which is kind of in between full army scale and skirmish scale. And
yeah, they've got their ARO in Infinity.
Yeah, and I've mentioned this elsewhere. One of my favorite game store incidents was somebody getting tabled because all that they had played up until that point was Warhammer 40k, and they tried using 40k tactics when they tried out Infinity for the first time and got completely blown out. Because those self-same tactics...
Tried running it.
Yeah, they tried doing the open charge thing, and Infinity actively discourages that.
Yeah. We originally in this one, I had like a limited reaction economy, where you had one reaction you could use each round, and well, that's more like D&D or some RPGs in that way. It also was very limited. It didn't give you the flexibility you needed to react to everything. And then if you did use your reaction, it had to be strong enough to make it worthwhile, which meant it was either going to be really good or just terrible. You couldn't use it at all.
I
And it
could
was also the
I could see that.
side effect of kind of that same thing. The same situation as like with Infinity. If someone walked out, everyone would just use their reaction to shoot.
Which
So it heavily favored a slow style with the defender, and that just wasn't the kind of energy we're going for. So that shifted over to something where you have a lot more different choices, a lot more reactions you can take, and that keeps play moving forward.
yeah, I think a parallel when it comes to having a more aggressive approach would be, say, War Machine. From what I've played of it, I'm more familiar with Iron Kingdoms as far as an RPG than the war game proper. But forcing someone to break formation is one of the big things with it. Like it kind of encourages a more aggressive playstyle.
Isn't that the one where they've got like your not like a caster or something, but like your little robot suits are powered by your champion or whatever?
Yeah,
I remember the exact terminology.
more or less.
So they have to stay within a certain range.
Yeah, they have to stay in that range. The caster has to provide essentially action points to the mechs, but the mechs are very powerful.
Yeah, and that's one that's like 3 health bars. It's like body, mind, spirit. If it's like a spiral outward, if I'm remembering correctly.
Yeah, the RPG was.
Been a while since I've seen that one.
But
Okay.
and there were some people who got on the fainting couch because the core book would take some pot shots at games that did play defensively.
Oh.
To which I can see why some people would take issue with that, but on the other hand, all's fair in love and riffing. You know.
Yeah, it's good. Good-natured. When it should be good-natured.
Oh yeah. But when it comes to that whole limited reaction and thing, and I'll be honest, I've never been a big fan of that in, say, 5e, for instance, because when you give players a limited resource, they're going to be tempted to be conservative with it.
Yeah, they always do.
I think we're all familiar with the potion order.
Yeah. Guilty of that.
Yeah, sometimes we've been that person. I'm not too proud to admit it. But when there's that notion of I may need this for later, even if you're saying so at the end of the campaign. Like, I can't use one of my 99 megalixirs. What if I need it for later? He says during the final boss of the campaign.
Have you seen the animation of the Heavy from Team Fortress wearing the Dovahkiin's helmet? He's out in Skyrim. He picks up the wings off a butterfly, nods, puts it in his backpack, says, "You are over encumbered," and falls straight over. That's what it feels. It feels like I must have all of these things in the event that I need that someday. Yeah, I want players to be able to get their resources back and then to be able to use them, but also not still to be like if everything's at full power all the time, it's not as interesting. So I have systems in there to kind of make it kind of an ebb and flow of getting your action or getting your power and then using it.
Oh yeah. And
better for tempo.
Yeah. And with that kind of thing in mind, I think one of the other things is it appears that you're going with a D6 die pool. Is it I've in something like, say, 40K or Warhammer Fantasy, you also have a D6 die pool, but the target numbers are static. In this case, is it always 4 and higher are considered hit are considered hits, and you're just needing a certain number of hits.
Yeah, it's more like Burning Wheel or like Mouse Guard, or there are sorts of derivatives in that.
Mhm.
Not that were derived from that, but like you know what I mean. Games like that where you assemble the pool of D6 with a 4+ succeed and then a 6 in I think in Burning Wheel and Mouse Guard a 6 is 2. In our case, it explodes.
Yeah. I know it said. I know you have it where it says you can't roll more than 5 dice. If there's a situation where you would roll more than 5, is it just treated as an auto hit?
Depending on the case of what it is, if it's bad, like we've got the Chaos Dice, if it's bad, that has some negative effects against you. If it's good, it's just either you don't roll it or you just re-roll. It's just re-rolls if you want to.
Mm-hmm.
That's how we work. Like, you can't roll less than 1, so if you would ever be forced to take a die out and roll 1, you just roll with, roll twice, take the worst result, but you don't have to worry about that being like an infinite spiral of bad. So if you're only rolling 1 die and you get like remove 3 dice, which that you'd have to be in a really bad situation for that to happen, but you don't roll 3 times. You just roll twice.
Yeah, and it sounds like Chaos Dice is something you're only doing for specific actions.
Yeah, so it's when there's a chance of like the enemy interfering with it or the terrain. It's basically like complications that you can see in other games. If you've played any like the Fantasy Flight Star Wars games where they have
Right.
the bad dice.
Yeah, Seraph.
Yes, like that, far less complicated. We just have a table of options for the GM to choose from based on the number of hits, and then critical hits give them way more options. It's I believe it's all of them. So yeah, it's kind of the original system we used, where each enemy had a separate ability that would activate on Chaos Dice, which was neat, but also a nightmare to keep track of as GM and as a player.
Mm-hmm.
So we went instead swapped out for that, which allowed us to adjust. We're on the fly.
Yeah, I can.
Discord just bumped up here.
Yeah, I can get that. And when it comes to the setup, is it a case where you'd advise people to have normal dice and chaos dice rolled in 2 different colors?
Yeah, that certainly helps. You can have black and white, red and blue,
Mm-hmm.
gold and purple, whatever you want to do.
Yeah, but just something in that sense to separate the two, because it does sound like there's going to be situations where you're rolling normal and chaos dice at the same time.
Oh yeah, the only time you won't roll chaos dice unless you're also trying to perform an action.
Mm-hmm.
So the only time you will roll them is when something else is going on. So that just keeps things easy, or you can have 2 frisbees if you want to roll them in frisbees.
Oh yeah, I can get that. And
yeah,
with that in mind, I think the next thing I did want to get into is when it comes to combat. You describe it as roll 3d6 for a long action or 2d6 for a short action. What would you say is the dividing factor on that when it comes to attacking?
So there's an additional, say under that, and there's also under standard actions. You got standard long actions, standard short actions. Most of the time, most of your attacks are going to be long actions. You usually can't make an attack as a short action unless something special lets you do it, like if you have a dagger or a pistol or something. So by default, your attacks are going to be long actions.
Yeah.
And then it's kind of like short's going to be your faster. It's also action speed, so those are going to come in faster and resolve faster in the event of a tie. So like you roll, for example, kind of the chaos dice, you get a bad, you've got a lot of hits on it. The GM's kind of, steepling their fingers together, coming up with something bad to pull off, and they decide they want to make their Minotaur attack you.
Mm-hmm.
Well, the Minotaur's attack is slow, and as long as you attack first, if you kill him before it's to attack you, then nothing bad happens.
Mm-hmm.
Sorry, Discord keeps doing something. It's like trying to notify me about something.
Yeah, that's odd. But
Oh, is that your side?
no, I'll just chalk it up to technology hates us and move on.
Yeah.
But with that said, I've seen some cases where you have to roll to hit and then you have to roll to wound. Obviously, again, Warhammer is another case of this. Is that something that you're doing, or is it a case where damage is set and you're dealing that damage when you successfully attack?
The latter, where damage is set plus modifiers.
Mm-hmm.
You'll have an ATK value on your weapon plus any modifiers you've got on there, so you might have like 3 ATK, just means hit for 3 damage.
Mm-hmm.
Damage is just minus the relevant type of armor, subtract the type of armor from it, and that's the damage you do.
Yep.
Usually pretty straightforward. And then you have wounds that a figure can take. It's typically 1, so the idea is with anything that's like a normal or lower class monster, if you get a good hit on them, they're probably dead.
Mm-hmm.
Or it's not necessarily like tone-wise, I don't want to give people the wrong impression that this is going to be like a highly fatal whatever. Part of the nature of this kind of tournament is you can set the tone however you want, and in a lot of like the classic tournaments, they're typically not fatal. It's they get knocked out, or they get teleported to another dimension, whatever happens to them.
Yeah, the
But they
decision
typically
to make
don't
it
die.
the decision to make it that level of lethal should be a table decision, not the assumption that it's always fantasy Vietnam or something, as to quote an old meme. Something else I noticed that I did find amusing, especially given the 5e background that you've got, is second wind being a universal action as opposed to an archetype specific one.
Yep.
Which is funny because well, that's how it was originally. Back in the edition I'm supposed to hate, but I don't, because the check bounced.
Yeah, it's also just good. Thematically, it's a good way to bring in tension or give you like a mini rest essentially in the middle of a fight,
Mm-hmm.
without breaking up the tempo. And it's also something that we've done in our 5e books, where we've made that a option for everybody, because it just feels good it doesn't matter who you are, to just kind of catch your breath and then dive right back into the fighting.
Yeah. And within that, there's on the matter of character creation, it looks to me like for example, each ancestry, that's where part of the point buy comes in, because of how traits are set up with each one.
Yeah.
So is it a case? So is it a case of you've got when you pick your 2 categories, you've got a certain number of points to spend on traits?
Yeah. So you have, like in that case, the current one, I believe it's 5.
Mm-hmm.
You have for your ancestries, and then you have 5 for building your weapon, 5 for it's like that in each category where you pick. That needs to get some final balance when we get that out, and try it out with more people, and of course, then we'll have some more options available. I'm leaning toward having certain options that are available unique to each ancestry, and then having some that are discounted. For example, if you are like divine or infernal, you'd have a discount on buying wings, because angels, devils get wings.
Yeah.
And whereas it'd be harder if you're, say, a giant, to have wings, but I'm not saying you can't. I didn't really like that big bird enemy in Shadow of the Colossus. We could make that. You could make that.
Yeah. And when it comes, I know that there's a decent variety of skills, but when it comes to skills, are you testing that to make sure that there's a decent variety, but also that skills don't get too situational? Because that's something that I saw a lot, especially in a lot of those RPGs that came out of the late '90s and early '90s, if I'm being honest.
I mean, like, so we've got like the skills, which are more like the D&D skills, and then we've got like the calling them like active powers or whatever. So you're referring to like the skills.
Yes.
Okay. So here, those are more kind of like, I wouldn't say ancillary, but they're an additional matter where they're typically not going to affect combat, but they're kind of a supporting. They play a supporting role where you can do certain actions in certain ways, or they're more interacting with like the environment or terrain than they are necessarily with the. So like in D&D, for example, you'd have like a medicine test to see if you could heal someone, a perception test to see if you can do that. But we've moved some of those necessary things over to just the attributes, because you have 5 core attributes. So we use like a strength, what you would call it probably a strength save. We have a strength test, which would cover everything for like strength and constitution in D&D. Each one covers a broader category, so we don't end up with anything that feels like it's not worth taking. And your skills are more, the actual skills you take are more about how you play your situational strengths off of it. And they probably won't affect your combat abilities, but they're really good for support and role play and that sort of thing.
Yeah, I can certainly get that. Now, when it comes to okay, I appreciate the sample origins there, because that's a way to sidestep the analysis process thing I've mentioned. And when it comes to perks, I have a feeling that perks are somewhat analogous to feats, but you don't fall into the same problem that happens with feats in games that have them, because they're categorized. At least here.
Yeah. The idea is that you work together to build your... each one builds into your attribute scores, and also gives you something interesting you should do. So kind of talking to a lot of other people about, some friends about this from different games, especially like the Fallout series. If you played Fallout 4, actually has a really neat perk system. I like their little window with all the little animations and everything, but a lot of the actual perks are pretty boring.
Yeah.
Like even though like mechanically this is good, you're like, this isn't. But then you go down to the one in like the endurance tree, and it's you can breathe underwater and you're immune to radiation and water, and you're like, yes. Yeah, every one of my characters has to take that, because it's just the most interesting thing on there, and it's also extremely useful. And we don't want kind of little apples to oranges here, but we don't want perks you take to feel like they're either like, I guess I took that. Yeah, they need to be something like there has to be some reason you're excited to get it. Like you grab for D&D, you get the Magic Initiate, and you're like, oh great, I can cast cantrips. But then you get something like Sentinel, and you're like, I can now stop every enemy that passes me. Yeah. Mechanically, it's just...
Something I've come to realize over the years is that there's one analogy, if we're using video game analogy, that I think is the ultimate I won't say the ultimate, but a good direction to lean into regarding things like feat or perk or design or whatnot. And oddly enough, that was the way perks worked for the longest time in Call of Duty, especially in like the better era, i.e., the original Modern Warfare era.
Yeah.
Because despite some of the problems with some of them, looking at you, Last Stand, the idea with them is that you were picking certain perks because it best fit the playstyle that you were that you were emphasizing and the weapons that you were using. Like if you're going to be going in with a LMG as part of your loadout, you're probably going to want something like Scavenger, which is going to give you more ammo on pickup, so you can have more opportunities to use that LMG that's going to be an ammo hog.
Was it Vulture that lets you take skills from someone or weapons?
I think it might have been.
It's been a long time.
Now, granted, I'm not saying every perk was useful in that regard. I mean, I can't think it. Everybody picked Juggernaut to the point where there's whole videos about how much people hated how too useful Juggernaut was. And
I mean, you could speed.
Yeah, and
go fast.
I mean, obviously going fast means more opportunity to not die, especially when, with the way COD worked back then, you were a few hits away from being dead. But the point is that it's a commitment to a given playstyle. And it's for that reason that having ones that end up being over useful or too situational, it's definitely something that should be discouraged, in my opinion. And as a bit of an aside, that's why I had said that the way feats work in 5e was a case of missing the point.
Sure. Like small incremental changes usually. I mean, they're like mechanically, it's like, yeah, I understand. I get a +1, but I'm not usually excited to get that.
Especially when you're only getting that every few levels.
Yeah. I mean, Pathfinder, like, their stuff's also usually pretty small, but they give them way more frequently. And in addition to your other stuff, it's like, well, you hit this level, now you get a leadership feat, and you get a class feat, and then in the next level you get a race feat and a class power, and like it gives you way more stuff to work with, even though it's kind of small and it does build on its own. But then you get something like, you know, now you have wings, now you're immune to all the ground traps.
You know what's funny really about the whole beat every 4 levels thing that you see with like 5e? It's the fact that the intent of feats when they were introduced, which was an evolution of proficiencies, was personalization of character. But because of the fact that that's the route they took with feats, that's, I believe, the reason why you see so many classes that have feats in all but name. The biggest example of that is the Warlock. Like, a lot of the invocations in another game would have been feats. Yeah,
I mean, they probably would be in like Pathfinder 2nd edition. They would be.
Mm-hmm. Even in or just in Pathfinder 1st edition, a lot of them would probably be feats. And I know that some people will inevitably go, "Well, do you want the sprawling mess that was the feat system back in D&D 3rd edition?" No, I definitely don't. But that pendulum swings both ways. Yeah,
a bit too. Yeah.
The feat system in 3rd edition certainly was sprawling and had a lot of traps. Nobody's going to deny that. But that doesn't make taking the opposite, more restricted approach automatically better.
Yeah. Definitely, like, in the case... I just said, like, I do enjoy that Pathfinder's more willing to give you that sort of stuff, but the only time I've actually gotten people to sit down, but I haven't gotten people to sit down and actually play a game of 1st edition Pathfinder, So the only time I've been able to do that was the Kingmaker video game, which handles a lot of that for you. So you can look through the whole list of all your feats and everything and go like, okay, so I want this one. I bet when I hit level 7 I can get this one. Whereas in the book, that is a lot of work.
It doesn't exactly
something
help
I've been...
that things like feat tax work, because the Owlcat video games are using Pathfinder First Edition. I don't think we've had a video game RPG yet that uses Second Edition's rule set as the base, which is a real shame.
Yeah,
because I think
yeah, it's good. I think Owlcat specifically, I heard from someone else that they weren't gonna do that. They were gonna stick to first if they did.
Although since Owlcat's most recent stuff was doing their own thing with Rogue Trader.
Yeah. I got a long list.
But I would say instead that for me a bigger thing is having them categorized instead of that sprawling list. I will admit a bit of bias because I was a big fan of the categorization of feats in Fantasy Craft, which was a 3.5 overhaul from the late 2000s. The idea there is that every feat was assigned to a category, and when the expansions would come around, those feats would be categorized as well. So you never had to ask whether or not a feat counted as a bonus feat. If a class had bonus feats as a feature, it would list the category that would be applicable.
Yeah.
But it seems with
like
the perks
centipede.
that you've got, it's never just +1 to an ability score or something like that. It's that and something else.
Yeah. And even in the cases where it is strictly just a bonus, there's usually some sort of caveat as to it's encouraging you to go a certain way. Like I've got a couple for you must have +7 in two different categories, so it's still encouraging you to specialize in a certain way rather than just like, here's a point.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Now, when it comes to archetypes, what were some of the major influences you had when it came to designing those, since they're not exactly a linear class setup from what I'm seeing here?
Yeah, they cover quite a few different ideas for like what you could, the kind of roles you might play in combat, as opposed to the fantasy class system. There are definitely some inspirations from that, but it's more of like what kind of role, what kind of specialization do you perform in that combat scenario. So like the Shadow is our sneaky. It's not the only one who can sneak. Obviously, I don't want to make that sound like they're the only one who can do any of these things. Like the Dragoon is the one who starts with a steed, but we'll have it in there so that anyone can. That'll be something available later with the items and everything we're working on. But you've got kind of a starting point for what is it that you are good at. So if you want to deploy like in a skirmish game from any side of the battlefield, you'd pick Shadow, and then you're really into placing terrain pieces because you have little either destructible or modifiable terrain that you can put down. I have a lot of fun with that sort of thing, 'cause it's ways to modify your play area. You play Tactician, or you could go Enchanter to change up the battlefield. So you kind of pick what it is you want to do, and then find an archetype combination that suits your playstyle.
Yeah, I can certainly get that. And because of the way you have it set up, what would be the advantage or disadvantage to picking just one archetype as opposed to picking two?
You can, essentially. We do have it set so that you pick two, or it asks you to pick two, but you can just pick all skills from one if you want. If you just want all the powers and stunts and everything from a single one, you can do that. So you'd essentially just be giving up versatility for more specialization.
I could see that, and it does seem that you've got a good that there is a variety of them, but what I did notice is that a lot of them lean into a bit of a fantasy leaning. Um, do you have plans for certain archetypes that would lean more into SF, just due to the wide variety of characters with what Orobos is trying to be?
I see what you mean. Like if the certain like turns of phrase like enchanter might be more associated with like a fantasy
Mhm,
setting, but not necessarily. It's not necessarily tied to that. If how would you define yourself
mhm.
in this setting? So it's not strictly linked to any
Yeah.
uh like fantasy or science fiction, and you can call them as you wish, but we have this as a kind of a starting point and a shared set of references for everyone.
Yeah, I could see that. Now,
And
each
you
one
can
of
call
them
like the
has passive powers, special actions, and stunts. The latter two, I'm curious what the thematic dividing line between them is.
okay. So you'll have on your character sheet, you've got all of your standard actions, standard long actions, standard short actions. Your archetype gives you can select a certain number of them. You don't won't be able to select them all unless like you went all in on one archetype. Uh, it's just giving you new actions that you'll be able to pick and essentially add into your actions available at any time. To be like, okay, I've got this as a new long action option, or this is a new short action. Stunts are modifiers on any action that's any valid action. So often, or most frequently, you have stunts when you hit something, but you also have stunts when you defend, stunts when you move. Just kind of refer to whatever it is. It'll tell you. So we've got uh, it is to have one page of all your static stuff, all your static information. And the second page of your character sheet will be organized by all your different stunts. You've got like all you can. I will provide space. You can do it either as attack stunts, or you can say these are my ranged attack stunts. When you meet those conditions, you can say, all right, I want to do this, or okay, I want to do this as a way, and it's supposed to go really quickly. You just pick one. You're limited to a single stunt per action, no matter how many. Like it doesn't matter if it lets you make 3 attacks or whatever. You are limited to one stunt per action, which also helps people from feeling that analysis paralysis, where they know like, okay, I got to pick this, and it's usually pretty specialized for what they want to do. So you have like when you throw someone, you can throw them and use them to whack somebody. Like, don't make me hit a guy with another guy. Uh, that sort of thing. So you pick like, what do I want to do in this situation?
And I could see that, and it also I do find it amusing that what I'm seeing when it comes to equipment, that both you and I ended up leaning into. It seems like we're leaning into a tag-based setup when it comes to letting players create custom weapons.
Yeah, it helps quite a lot, especially because I don't know what necessarily they are going to call them. So that one, as you can see, that's kind of our starting setup with a lot of weapon examples. And what we're going to do is have them more categorized. So swords, I've used this as an example for someone recently. We'll change to short sword, claymore, and dueling sword as the 3 bases. And then it'll be up to you how you modify that. So if you want to play, say, guts, for example, you could go claymore and then take the oversized tag and build out from there as to what you want to do to make your giant sword.
And I suppose someone could reinterpret some of them to represent unarmed fighting styles. I know I've done that with my setup.
Yeah, and they can also be like natural weapons if you're like, you're playing a robot or a living scarecrow or something, and you've got a blade arm. You can say, well, that's my blade arm,
Yeah.
this short sword. And if you change damage type from slashing to energy, you can say, well, here's my lightsaber. But it also has to be something more specific, like more than just trying to like reflavor this thing. It's not like GURPS or Fate, for example, where you could have, it's not a perfect representation, but you say like, this is my ranged weapon of wand blasting. It has to have a base that gives it more identity and more of somewhere to build out from there. But we do still want to make that option available for like how you define your weapon. It's a big part of your character tournament.
Oh yeah.
Like fight.
Speaking of that, because it's me and because I have to work my gimmick, of the archetypes that are currently available, which one would you say would be the closest mark to the idea of somebody playing a monk equivalent? I had to ask that kind of thing because it's me.
So monk. You might go Tempest. That one's kind of a like. So that one relies a lot on luck, either good luck and bad luck and gambling. Basically, pushing your luck is a big part of it, but it's also about getting enemies to miss you and hit each other, leaping over things. It just feels the most thematically like that. Like when I thought in my head, like what kind of class this would be, the image I had was like the various Wukong characters in like MOBAs like Dota, and I think they're all just called Wukong. Yeah, to be the mischievous monkey with a stick.
I could get that, and I think maybe I missed it, but I think grappling is a core thing that can be theoretically done by anyone.
Yes, it should be under the standard actions. It's recently got renamed to just grab because it was easier for everyone.
And I have a feeling that it sounds like it's already had its use because you already mentioned grabbing and throwing an enemy to use them as a improv projectile.
Yes, I'm happy to say we don't have the complicated grappling rules that you'll see in some other games, to use the infamous example, but we do have a few different options for what you can do. If you've grabbed onto somebody, you can obviously just let them go. You can throw them, you can slam them into prone, or you can just kind of give them a bear hug to do some basic bludgeoning damage.
Oh yeah. And I think that's vital because I know I've had plenty of cases where somebody who comes from a very wrestling background in terms of what they want to play tries to do that in certain games and ends up discouraged into doing so because of the amount of work involved to just do a grapple.
Yeah, in this case, it's usually just a straight attack roll or a straight save.
Which I'm perfectly fine with. It's like I said, a lot of times you have the infamous paragraph of text, and most people, they're not really interested in grabbing and squeezing. They're interested in grabbing so they can suplex somebody.
Yeah. Closest thing we have would be just the so while you're holding onto an enemy, you've got those 3 special actions you can take, which are just considered standard actions. That's not stunts. So you can do that and then modify whatever you're doing with a stunt. The 3 we've got, the closest thing to that would just be slam down. It's just make an attack, they have a save, damage and knock prone. Pretty straightforward. And then you can say it's a suplex, say it's a giant obstacle, however you want to flavor that.
I could see that. Now, since this could be used as an RPG as much as a skirmish game, do you have plans on doing a kind of simplified version of character creation to handle like NPCs or the like, or is it a case where PCs and NPCs are made identically?
Something like that. There's some options. There's another section that's going to be in there calling the lab, where it's how to build your monsters, as I know you're interested in that as well. Build out with some basic options like punch, run, and that's just a basic action, but how to make a simple creature for especially anything that's not of a player class. They're not going to have nearly the same options or strength as a player will. There's two different classes of enemy that are really high up there. You got the Nemesis and the Boss. A Nemesis is literally just made like a PC. You just make them like you're making a player character. Throw them in there as the biggest threat on the battlefield, usually. And then you've got the boss characters, which use more of the monster rules for like special abilities, and they can typically do things that players can't, or that would be very broken if players could do it. The same thing with little monsters, like this little monster might be immune to, lightning damage, which isn't necessarily something you'd want to give to a player, especially like right out the gate, unless there was some special circumstance, but it's not that broken if you just give it to this little minion. Like, oh, well, that makes sense, it's a little rock guy. And it makes it more interesting rather than just trying to, plow through everything with the same strategy.
Pretty much, and nobody wants to do just the same thing. That's the definition of insanity.
Yeah.
But
it's always more fun to kind of have some interesting ways you can interact around certain enemies. You can something I like to do from that is we have rules for collision, knocking enemies into terrain. So if you can whack them back into something, you can do bonus damage that way.
Yeah, I could definitely get with that, especially since one of the more infamous moments in some of my campaigns has been somebody treating the battlefield like a game of pinball. Because I had house ruled it to where somebody could do essentially wall banging using a ring of RAM. So he decided to have several rings of RAM melded together to look like brass ducks. The results were inevitable. And it's also a good way to reward terrain use, which I do feel in some games terrain gets a little bit underused.
Yeah, I want people to be excited as much about the place where they're at, just as a part of the battlefield. Like, part of the effects on the chaos dice are having either the environment, so either the battlefield as a whole, or that specific terrain you're in, do something. So, like, if you're in a collapsing steampunk factory, then as a minor effect, it's everybody's gonna make a save, or you get knocked prone by falling debris, or on a major thing, a hole opens up in the floor. Everyone's got to save against falling, and if enough damage happens, the entire thing can fall down. Now it's just difficult terrain for everyone. That's something we also want to have in there for a section we're calling the Atlas, for building basically kind of like a point-buy option, or like similar to like building your character, and you're building specific terrain pieces, and you're like, okay, so this one, it's challenging, so we know that if you don't succeed, you're going to fall down this big hill, and it's also hazardous, so if you fail to save, you get burned by all the, flaming grass or embers, whatever's on there. You pick some modifiers, and you go nuts with it.
That can certainly work. Now, as far as a page count, what are you shooting for?
We're looking for probably about 100. I know usually these things end up being a bit longer than anticipated. Our last one, for example, we're like, oh, it's going to be a little bit shorter than the book we did before, and it ended up being longer. But this one we're shooting for around the 100-page mark, because we're feeling pretty good about where it's, like, the options we have, but we're adding on from there, and currently it's like 80, it's like 80-ish pages. And with some streamlining and moving, like, moving some things around to sidebars and whatnot, we should be able to keep that down from getting out of hand.
With make sure to knock on whatever wood is nearby.
I have a desk. Yep.
Because you already jinxed yourself once, but best not to do it twice.
Yeah. It does help working with something more of this scale where it's also kind of a departure from our previous works where everything for D&D is very verbose by nature,
Mm-hmm.
working with their style. There's this, I can just say get +1
Mm-hmm.
instead of on this action a character gains it, the very long sentence. So it does save quite a bit of time and quite a bit of space. And working with this kind of scale has been a nice breather from getting so far in the weeds with D&D that you're okay. I need to check chapter this, page number 67, to make sure it matches with chapter this, page number 48. So that it's refreshing, and I hope also makes it easier to balance. It has been so far.
Yeah, and I do think there's a bit of misunderstanding regarding how people view balance. So I don't.
Yeah, I mean, it doesn't have to be perfect. I'm not looking for everything's perfectly of the same level. There are going to be some better circumstances than others. Like anything that's perfectly balanced is probably not super interesting. Having certain ways where you can find ways to use something, man, that was really good to use that here. It feels good.
Yeah, personally, I've taken the approach that I think balance only becomes a problem when something's stepping on other people's toes or stepping on other people's fun.
Yeah, it's kind of like if everything is overpowered, then nothing feels out of place.
Mm-hmm.
Or if, on the flip side, if everything feels underpowered, then nothing feels fun. It's just kind of finding, I would say, not necessarily game balance, but like balance of player perception.
Yeah. This is why I've always been so critical of certain caster archetypes in D&D or Pathfinder that are way too useful to the point that their entire party's by themselves. Or
Yeah.
spells like knock, which, in my opinion, step on the toes of, say, a rogue. Like, why have a rogue when you could just have a wizard cast knock and do what a rogue was going to do automatically?
Yeah, you could stick some little traps in the way. Like, oh, don't worry, party, I'm going to cast knock. Oops, there's a spike through me.
I mean, yeah, you could, but that always feels like a bandage.
Yeah, and it kind of is like specifically try to stop a player from, like, well, I took that spell for a reason. And yeah.
Yeah, that's the kind of thing where the balance, where a bit of the nerf bench should probably be called. Which I usually don't argue. But in special circumstances, I think it's applicable, and that kind of thing is one of them. Or those particular builds of caster where why have a fighter around where you can have a druid do wild shape and do just as much damage as a fighter and be just as tough as a fighter?
Yeah, they really weakened that in 5.5. So they took away their 10 pip points.
Yeah, though I'm not sure if they took.
No bummer. I don't own that.
I feel like
that
that's
one, so
I feel like that's swinging the pendulum too far the other way. I think there was a nice trade-off of, okay, you can do that, but you can't do that and cast at the same time. That's a trade-off I'm fine with. If you're the idea of you can't use magic while you're wild shaped or something like that.
Yeah, there was one. I remember I found it and I looked up on the forums. I'm like, can I get around with doing this? It was like cast on a creature. I said critter and creature together. Cast on it, and then it can breathe fire as an action as long as you maintain concentration. Now, like, can you do that? Because you don't lose concentration. It mentions specifically you maintain concentration. So anyway, I looked in the forums and they're like, yes, you can turn yourself into a mouse that breathes fire because you maintain concentration.
Mm-hmm. Of course,
I don't know.
yeah. Of course, when it comes to when it comes to concentration, I've talked about how much of a drain that is, but it seemed I didn't see anything that was in that same vein of you have to be doing this one thing in order to maintain a given action.
No. No, we have concentration as something, but it's just kind of something you are maintaining. Like, it's just assumed that you are keeping this up, and you can't concentrate on two things at once unless there's some special rule that says you can, as a way to keep your focus of thinking of, like, you know, you're moving around and focusing like, I must maintain the vortex to keep the monster at bay.
Mm-hmm.
Now just let me throw some lightning over at this guy. So you can keep doing some acts, but not getting to the point where you have like a whole bunch going on at once, because they're usually fairly useful while they're maintained.
Yeah.
But not, yeah, again, it doesn't like take your entire turn.
Yeah, the big reason I think concentration has the reputation it does is because it is such a bottleneck on the action economy. In the usual sense.
Yeah, and I can see that usually it's especially valuable too, the
Mhm.
spell slot or ability, and if you just immediately lose concentration, you're like, well, there goes all that. That never feels good.
No. Oh, and if I'm being honest, it also made it so that you had that false choice thing where you needed a spell like haste just to decently contribute.
Sure, I can see that. I know usually when I played martial classes in like the regular 5th edition, I would go for whatever and then mix with rogue.
Mm-hmm.
Because I just needed the bonus action to do stuff.
Yeah, the dip class problem. This was a problem in 3rd edition as well. Which I find horribly ironic. You know, because
I know you can go multiple in 4th edition, but tough finding people who like 4th edition.
Yo.
Yeah.
And with 4th edition, it has a much different action economy that kind of sidesteps that problem. Because of the fact that you have different actions, whether it be standard, move, minor, free, all centered around your choice of powers, and sometimes beyond that.
Yeah, I do like the at-will powers. That was helped with the power available at all times for the different archetypes.
Mm-hmm.
Having little things that are like, yeah, that's interesting. That's something that really is thematic for me. That was something that definitely influenced that, having those at-will powers.
I've heard some people argue that cantrips in 5e is a successor to the at-will powers, and I do not agree with that.
Very limited. I mean, like for casters only.
Which there's a lot of 5e was sold to me as a uniting of the editions, and there's a lot of it that's a case of not understanding why something was there originally.
Yeah, can see that if they did take some things out. And do wish, especially from creatures. I think Matt Colville's done some videos on that where he talks about like the various creatures and how much more fun it is to run a dragon in fourth. Let me see if I can get his cadence right. Fourth rather than just like that.
I haven't watched any of Colville's videos, and the only time I've commented on anything he's done was when I covered some of the initial stuff for Draw Steel, even though I didn't know it as Draw Steel at the time.
Yeah, the game of, well, we don't know what it is. It's raised several $1 million. We don't know what to call it. It's not even done yet.
So once I finally got a hold of how it actually works, it's like, all right, I see what's going on here, and I had to laugh because of how much of 4th edition's DNA is in it. Because I keep finding games that are, and some of your work is no exception to this, that is taking notes or heavily inspired by the edition everybody keeps telling me was the absolute worst and nothing good came out of.
It was hard to find any copies of that, you know? Like, I got, I think I got my 4th edition book around the same time I got my 5th edition one. They're, come out around the same time. I hadn't actually owned the books before that. Then I had to search around on, like, eBay, Amazon for a while, find some other ones I wanted, like the DM's Guide, and I just wanted the set. And that's been really good and interesting looking at some of these creatures, and especially when you look at like the monster manual for 4th, you're like, why'd you take this thing out? I know what this thing is. It's like from Chult in here, but why isn't it in the general list? It's really freaky and weird, and I really want to throw that at a player to make him freak the heck out. Because that's like half the fun of a monster, is them realizing like, oh crud, what can this thing do? And then they kill it.
Yeah, I think the other thing to note when you bring up monsters is how much I do not miss challenge rating.
Yeah, that's really hard to like accurately guess. Because I mean, you're basically guessing. Because I've had situations where I'm like, okay, this looks like it should be, like according to the numbers, this should be fine, and they just blow through it. And other times you're like, okay, according to the numbers, this shouldn't be that much of a problem for them, and things go very badly very quickly. It's
when challenge
an
rating was
imprecise
introduced in 3rd, the big problem that I had with it is that it assumes a balanced party of 4. I think that's too much of an assumption to be making.
Also kind of like, well, they probably have the most recent magic items. They probably have a +1 here. But if a player isn't playing, you know, the optimal way that the game thinks they are, then they're going to start falling behind the curve pretty darn quickly. But in other cases, they can advance in ways that it really doesn't expect, and then the challenge rating just can't account for that. So that's, I guess, kind of to bring that around, we don't really have a challenge rating, but that's because we don't also have levels. We have consider doing something for progression that way, for having like tiers where you have like adventurer, hero, legend, something like that, where basically you just have access to more points in the individual categories, but we don't really have levels.
That kind of setup is pretty standard when it comes to minis and skirmish minis. You know, if somebody is saying that they're building a certain army for a miniature war game, they'll usually talk about the point total.
Yeah, it's kind of like that, or like, I just kind of use the Frostgrave example again. I think like your wizard is like an apprentice, expert, master, something like that. It's the idea of like how much juice you can put into your monster.
Pretty much, and I could see that. I could see a tier setup that's just a point budget,
Yeah, it definitely helps make sure that everything stays relevant, but also still giving you that feeling of progression. Like, you're probably not going to be as threatened by a zombie if you're at like the highest, like you've got all these available options. You can probably deal with those things. But if you're someone who's new, it's just like, oh man, there's 2 zombies. I gotta think about what I'm doing. But you're definitely stronger than them. They're probably minion class in this game, minion or normal, and your player characters can handle that easily. It's not a, yeah. But yeah, kind of, yeah.
But with that,
not having a CR.
Yeah. With that said, what would you be shooting for as far as a release window?
So we've got that. We've got that as just 6 months out, and I'm pretty sure we can make that. I know I usually get the jinx self on that one, but partly because it's not as long. It's going to be about 100, and it's mostly there. The main things we need at this point are to finish up the art, finish up additional assets like the character sheets, and then run it through a couple rounds of public testing to get the final version we want to use. Because again, we have a pretty good base right now. We want to find if there's anything that players especially like, don't like, anything that really clicks, or they're like, well man, I really wish we had this right now, and go, oh yeah, now's a perfect time to catch that. So yeah, we hope to have that pretty timely order. There's a version I'm already working on updating it right now, based on the feedback we've gotten so far from the Kickstarter. And we'd like to get this out, testing with as many people as often as we can, and then get it back in the hands of the backers, let them try it, let them see what they like, what they don't like. And yeah, so I'm feeling pretty good about that, really. Especially since, art-wise, art assets are pretty well along in the book. The last thing we'd have to do after all of that, after the art, design, and everything, is the actual, like, design layout of the book. That part, I'm not totally sure how long it will take. That one I'm not doing personally. That we do have someone in our team handling that. But he's done a good job of that, and he's done it quite in a timely manner before, so I don't see any significant issues with that.
I could see it. But with that said, I do want to sincerely thank you for once again taking the time out of your schedule to come all the way to my monastery and enjoy the madness that happens here.
Yeah, thank you for inviting me. Thanks for having me.
Anytime you see fit to return, the door is always open. As I often say around here, drinking is not mandatory, but it is encouraged. And, of course, a sincere thanks goes out to everyone who took the time out of their schedule to come onto the show and enjoy the madness. And there'll be plenty more where that came from, as there always is here, on the open bar of the internet. But until then, on behalf of the good brothers present and not present, my name is Mildra. I am your gaming monk. Stay fucking frosty, everybody.
遅い上洛が上長年関税を往年関税を年々重心期年々不利し関税ラーメン釣りを遅い上洛が上昇年関税を往年関税を年々重心期年々不利し関税を